I made it from master's student to the graduate visa and eventually getting sponsored for a skilled worker visa for over 3 years. In 2022, I moved to the UK to do a 1 year's master's degree. But I quickly realized something. Finishing your degree was actually the easy part. The real challenge was figuring out how to stay in the UK afterward. Because moving from a student visa to the graduate visa and eventually to a skilled workers visa is where many people get stuck. But over the past few years, I managed to make that transition. So in this video, I want to break down the entire journey of how I stayed in the UK after my master's. If you're new here, hi, my name is Matthew Lee. I originally trained as a medical doctor in Jamaica, and then I transitioned into the business side of healthcare. We'll go through 3 key stages. First, the student visa route that allowed me to come to the UK to study. Second, the graduate visa route, which gave me the flexibility to work full-time after finishing my degree. And finally, the skilled worker visa, which allowed me to stay in the UK long-term with employer sponsorship. So for each stage, I'll explain the eligibility, the costs, the work rules, and the timelines. And I'll also share what the process actually looks like from my own experience. So let's start at the beginning with the student visa. Chapter 1, Master's Student Visa. So everything really started with the UK student visa. And if you want to study in the UK as an international student, this is usually the first visa you'll need. And the way it works is pretty straightforward. You first need to be accepted into a UK university, and then once you receive your offer and confirmation of acceptance, you can then apply for the student visa itself. But beyond just studying, one of the most important things about the student visa is that you're actually allowed to work while you're in the UK. So most students are allowed to work up to 20 hours per week during the term time and full-time during the holidays. And I think this is a really important detail if your long-term goal is to stay in the UK after graduation, because this part-time work can actually be your first opportunity to start building experience and relationships with companies in the UK. Now, in terms of the costs, studying in the UK can obviously be quite expensive. For most international students, tuition for a master's degree usually ranges somewhere between £15,000 to £30,000, depending on the university and the program. Then on top of that, you have the student visa application fee, which is currently around £524. When you apply for the student visa, you have to pay something called Immigration Health Surcharge, which gives you access to the NHS while you're living in the UK. For students, this is around £776 per year, and you'll usually have to pay this upfront for the full duration of the visa. And then of course there are living costs, which can vary depending on which city you're studying in. Outside of London, many students can spend somewhere between £900 to £1,200 per month on rent, food, and basic expenses. So when you add everything together, the total cost of coming to the UK for a 1-year master's degree can easily range between £30,000 and £45,000. So it's definitely a big financial and personal decision. But in my case, it also became the opportunity that allowed me to completely change the direction of my career. So I came to the UK to study a master's in management at Loughborough University. And even at that early stage, I already knew that if I wanted to stay in the UK long term, I needed to start building some work experience as soon as possible. So halfway through my master's, I already had started working part-time with a health tech startup while still studying. And my goal was really simple. If I could prove that I could add value to the company early on, then I knew there was a good possibility that I could turn this into a full-time role after graduation. And that decision ended up becoming really important later on in my journey. Because once you finish your degree, the next step is moving on to something called the graduate visa. And that's where things start to open up a lot more in terms of work opportunities. Chapter 2, the graduate visa. So once you finish your degree in the UK, the next big step in the journey is something called the graduate visa. And this visa is usually one of the biggest reasons why many international students choose to study in the UK in the first place. Because unlike the student visa or the skilled worker visa, the graduate visa gives you the ability to work full-time in the UK without needing sponsorship from an employer. And at the moment, the graduate visa allows you to stay in the UK for 2 years after finishing your degree. So that means during those 2 years, you're allowed to work almost any job for any employer without the company needing to sponsor your visa. And this is a huge advantage because one of the biggest challenges for international graduates is that they have to face the reality that companies have to sponsor their visas immediately after graduation if they want to keep them. And many employers are really hesitant to do that straight away. So essentially, the graduate visa basically gives you 2 years to gain experience, prove your value to the employer, and hopefully position yourself to sponsorship later on. Now, in terms of eligibility, the graduate visa is fairly simple. You need to have successfully completed a degree in the UK on a student visa, and then you need to apply for the graduate visa while you're still in the country. In terms of costs, the visa currently costs around £822 to apply. And like most UK visas, you now also need to pay the immigration health surcharge, which is around a whopping £1,035 per year. So for the full 2-year visa, that might roughly cost around £3,000. Now, one of the most important things about the graduate visa that you need to understand is that there's no salary requirement and no job restrictions. So you can work full-time, you can work on contract, you can switch jobs, you can work in startups, corporations, or even multiple roles. It gives you a lot of flexibility early on in your career. And in my case, that flexibility really made a big difference for me. So as soon as I became eligible for my graduate visa, I applied for it straight away. And once I had that graduate visa, it meant that the company could bring me on full-time without worrying about sponsorship yet. And by that point, I had already been working part-time with the health tech startup doing my master's. So transitioning into a full-time role within the same company and then sort of spending the next couple of years building experience and growing with the business was my goal. And if things went well, my next step would eventually be the skilled worker visa, because that is the visa that allows you to stay in the UK long-term with employee sponsorship and eventually lead to permanent residency. Chapter 3, the skilled worker visa. So after spending time on the graduate visa, the next big step was the skilled worker visa. And this is really the visa that allows international professionals to stay and work in the UK long-term. And unlike the graduate visa, the skilled worker visa does require employer sponsorship. So what this means is that the company you work for needs to be registered within the UK government as a licensed sponsor. And they must be willing to sponsor your role. And unlike the graduate visa, there are a few additional requirements. So first, the job needs to meet a certain salary threshold, and the role must fall under an eligible occupation category. So at the moment, the general salary threshold for a skilled worker visa is around £41,700 per year. However, if you're a recent UK graduate or considered a new entrant into the workforce, the requirement can be lower. So in many cases, the salary can be somewhere between 70 to 90% of the job's going rate, with a minimum of £33,400 per year. So this is actually one of the big advantages of studying in the UK first, because companies may find it easier to sponsor someone who studied in the UK compared to someone applying directly from overseas. And of course, the exact salary requirements depend on the specific job and occupation code. So it's probably always best to check the official UK government website for the most up-to-date rules. Now, there are also costs associated with the visa. For the applicant, you usually have to pay the visa application fee, which is currently around £700 for visas up to 3 years. And the huge cost is that you'll also have to pay the immigration health surcharge, which is now currently £1,035 per year. So for example, if you had a 3-year visa, the total cost for you, the applicant, at minimum would be somewhere around £4,000. But the employer sponsoring the visa also has to pay several fees on their side. This includes a certificate of sponsorship, which costs around £239, and something called the immigration skills charge, which can be around £1,000 per year for larger companies. So overall, the sponsorship can cost companies several £1,000s. which is why many employers are hesitant to offer it, unless they're really confident that you, the employee, are a good long-term fit. Now, in my case, I was fortunate enough that the company I had been working with already knew me quite well. And by the time I was looking for my skilled worker visa, I had already been working for them for over 2.5 years. I started with them part-time doing my master's and then full-time doing my graduate visa. So when the time came around to start thinking about the next step to the skilled worker visa, I already had a good, strong working relationship. And we had conversations about the future of my role and whether the company thought it made sense for me to continue going with the business. And fortunately enough, the leadership team agreed to move forward with the sponsorship process. So they began preparing the necessary paperwork, including the certificate of sponsorship, while I submitted my personal information and documents for the visa application. And, applause please, later in 2025, I was officially granted my skilled worker visa for 3 years. And looking back now, what really made the difference for me was the fact that I've been working with the same company for several years before that sponsorship conversation even came up. So by the time we were discussing the visa, it wasn't really a gamble anymore. They already knew the value I was bringing to them, and that sort of made the process easier on both of our sides. So, looking back, the journey of staying in the UK after my master's really happened in 3 big stages. So first, obviously, coming to the UK on a student visa to finish my degree, and then, which was really helpful, was going on to the graduate visa, which gave me the flexibility to work full-time and gain experience without needing sponsorship. And then finally moving on to the skilled worker visa, which allowed me to stay and continue working in the UK long-term. And for me, I think the most important factor was being able to work part-time as a student to build that experience. Because by the time the conversation for visa sponsorship came up, I had already been working with the same company for several years, and I could prove to them that the value I could bring was worth it. Now, of course, every situation is different, and this process can look really different depending on your industry, employer, and timing. But hopefully, sharing my journey gave you a clearer picture of how the student to skilled worker path can actually work in real life. And in the next video, I'm going to break down how I actually convinced my company to sponsor my skilled worker visa, because that conversation is often the hardest part of the entire process. So if you're interested in studying abroad, career pivots, or navigating international careers, please consider subscribing, because that's exactly what I will share on this channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.